philosophically, I really do believe that this is a social technology.
A lot of the narrative is also what problem are we solving and what value are we bringing to our users as well, whether it's data ownership, rewards.
These networks don't work unless you have wide groups of participants that are like supporting the build out.
Pulse focuses on your energy levels and productivity. And it just so happens that sleep, exercise, and other factors play into you being productive.
Killer use case that got this whole thing started was Bitcoin. It was, can we incentivize a bunch of machines to be turned on to play this economic game in exchange for some rewards?
I'm going to use the G word, which is governments. I know everyone hates governments in crypto, but even governments want access to this data from a policymaking perspective as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike, one of the co-founders of Lattice and a host of the Token Warrant. Today we've got a couple of very exciting and well-dressed guests in the show. We've got Derek from Collab Currency and River from Pulse, and we're going to be talking healthcare, wellness, AI, culture, and
all the fun stuff.
Yeah, all the good stuff, because we've got the right people to talk about it today. Derek, you're definitely, I think, the most
what did I do?
well-dressed person that we've had ever on the show.
Whoa!
I've actually good style.
I appreciate that.
Anyway, Derek, you've got, I think, a more unique background than most, but you've always been like pretty early to trends. So you were early to NFTs. I think you've done a bunch of writing on AI recently. And I don't know, just tell me, where are you finding inspiration on identifying stuff early? Because obviously I think Pulse fits in that category, but
for sure.
How do you find inspiration?
Man,
tell us about you.
First of all, great kickoff question, Mike. I love it. And I would say, just broadly, the internet is kind of like my muse. It's like you have all of this information, and even in the lens of something like Pulse, I think there's a interesting conversation to be had here about what it means to aggregate that type of real time data. But you've got all this information that people are sharing everything, every interesting tidbit about their lives in real time, every major innovation, every political event, every cultural milestone reached. And we have a form factor, whether it's Twitter or a blockchain explorer or, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, to be able to kind of index and ingest this information really quickly. And if you are plugged into the matrix and you're just constantly trying to find what's cool and what's interesting, and what are people hacking on, and what are people doing on their weekends, you're kind of able to see things, a little bit ahead of the curve. And so I would say that's something that I grew up on the internet. I love the internet. I spend a lot of time on the internet. And I would just say that's probably the thing I would attribute most to kind of thinking deeply about where the internet is going, is just staying plugged in as much as possible and finding people who love the internet as much as I do.
Yeah. That's a good answer. And, you guys, you talk about culture and consumer, and those are two categories that aren't always identified with crypto. Is culture. I mean, there is a crypto culture certainly, but it has its own uniqueness versus maybe what people think of culture. But how do you guys define culture? Is it you have an NFT gallery in Texas? What is it for you all?
Yeah, another great question. I think I wrote this piece 3 or 4 years ago, exploring kind of how value can be ascribed or accrete to things where attention networks are forming. You can kind of work backwards from anything that has value. It could be a consumer product. It could be a brand. It could be a musician. It could be a NBA team. And you can work backwards from these things, these payloads where value is being exchanged in a market. And you can kind of work through it and see how attention through some sort of like event, or through some outcome, or through some person, or through some trend, or whatever it may be, kind of catalyze like that eventual end state where like attention is forming. And I mean, the paper explored like, okay, if you look at the most successful major league sports teams, they're all in places with like highly dense attention networks. It's like Los Angeles and New York. If you look at the biggest, companies in the world, they're creating consumer products, whether it's like search or social or hardware. Like I've got 2 Apple phones on my desk. I'm using an Apple, consumer product right now in this MacBook. It's the same for NFTs. It's the same for fashion. It's the same for virtually every category. And so, I guess when I think of culture and consumer, just to kind of like, this is a very roundabout way to get to your question. I'm not particular in the sense of just like culture is just this one thing. I think culture is everything. And you just need to look at where attention is forming and aggregating. And if you can see it forming around infrastructure, then I would say that's something that has cultural impact. Like I think Ethereum and Solana, sure, these things are core plumbing and they can be culturally important. And same with the protocols, whether it's, Pump.fun or an Artblocks or a subnet on BitTensor. I think all of these things have the ability to kind of break through and create attention networks and become culturally interesting and deliver kind of consumer value. So I don't know, those are just rough ways I kind of think about it.
Yeah. And maybe, and we'll get to you next, or River, in a moment. And maybe this is a question for both of you, but like, some people have said like, we'll know crypto has arrived when people don't care about what blockchain they're on, and they're just using consumer applications and they're getting value out of that. Or there's another camp which is like, hey, Ethereum, Solana, they have their own cultures. People are ingrained in them. That's part of what makes them what they are. Like, what camp do you guys fit in? Like, do you think actually maybe people will care forever what blockchain they're on?
Yeah, I think both can be true. Like it's this weird thing that some people are trying to make you choose. You can have both. Like there will be a percentage of people that discover Solana and Solana culture through buying Sol, and then there is going to be a percentage of people that discover Solana through buying a token on Pump Fun or a wearable device where they have no idea, what's the underlying infrastructure, at least initially, but through a bit of exploration, etc., they eventually learn about it. Or maybe they never do. Either way, it's still a net positive for crypto generally, whether someone knows, what kind of, blockchain infrastructure they're on when they're interacting with your DApp or not.
Yeah. I think we're going to be caring about what blockchain we're on for a while. It's definitely I don't know if that's done anyway anytime soon. Maybe turning to you sit at the convergence of a bunch of different trends and culture. So, health and wellness, crypto, wearables. How did you end up combining all those things? Like, was it just you? Was it team? Like, what was the inspiration? Like, how did you guys get started?
Yeah. So, first is just first principles around what problem are we solving? And that's what drove our decision making at the beginning. So it's okay. We've been using these wearable devices for a couple of years now. There's some shortcomings each of these devices have. What are they not meeting for us from an expectations perspective? And then, okay, where's the opportunity here? If we want to do something, then where's the gap in the market that we can take advantage of? And the more we kind of dove into the area, the more we kind of realize actually these physical devices are essentially just deep in networks. The only difference is that they're on a wrist instead of sitting on the table, like sitting like near the edge like a helium node would be. So for us, it wasn't really about where do we sit at the intersection of any of this. It was just very much a case of what's the problem, how can we solve it. And then as a result of going through that exercise and that journey, we kind of now have discovered where we sit. And to a certain extent, some of our narrative and messaging on social media is related to where we sit because it helps our followers, our community members, etc., understand the product and the vision. But a lot of the narrative is also what problem are we solving? and what value are we bringing to our users as well, whether it's data ownership, rewards, having better insights regarding your health, etc. Both of these are really important. And my view is like it's two sides of the same coin. You gotta, you can't pick the side though. You gotta play both sides basically at the right time.
Well, maybe for people that don't know what Pulse is, what is Pulse? What are you building?
Yeah, let's take another step back. So Pulse is open health network that essentially aggregates health data across DNA, blood work, wearables, etc., encrypts it, and allows users to have data ownership where they can share that data with third parties in return for rewards, share it with other applications to kind of get more insights. And all of this is powered by our own native wearable device. So, we've built this device from scratch. It's called the Pulse Series 1. It's a wearable very similar to the Apple Watch. You
You
can get
hold
your
that
sleep
closer. I don't know if we got it in view. If you're
Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
okay,
Kind of,
yeah, there we
I'm
go.
kind of wearing it upside down. I should wear it upside down so it's easier for me to like show it. But
It's
yeah, you can
definitely
kind of see the device here.
a good
Um,
looking device.
yeah, so we've got like, a reasonably large team in China who's basically handled the production of the device end to end from design, choosing the sensors, choosing the straps, the wireless kind of charging, the packaging, etc. It's a pretty extensive process to go from an idea, and really it was just an idea, about 7, 8 months ago to like where we are today, where we've got a device, we've got 100 that are being shipped out literally tomorrow to beta testers, etc. We've done the benchmarking ourselves. We've kind of went through that manufacturing journey, and we're in a weird way, like that, obviously, like we're transitioning as a team. We've kind of gone from like a lot of focus on hardware to now a lot more focus on application, rewards, scaling, how we use the blockchain to kind of, reward our users, etc. as well. So it's been quite fun to go through this kind of journey as a kind of team.
I mean, I think obviously wearables and wellness trackers, whether it's apps, have gotten really popular over the past, I don't know, 10 years or so. I feel like Fitbit was maybe like the first to market. For
Yeah.
someone that like maybe either already uses one of these things or they don't use them, like what's the pitch to them? Like, hey, this is why you should use Pulse versus another app that you're using right now, or like just using Apple's Apple Health.
The narrative that we have and like the niche that we have is around Pulse unlocks an extra hour of productivity from your day. So I can literally give you an extra hour every day that other third party wearable devices cannot do. They focus on your health through sleep and exercise. Pulse focuses on your energy levels and productivity. And it just so happens that sleep, exercise, and other factors play into you being productive. So Pulse, my view is it's more for the young kind of 20 to like 35-year-old that wanna do a side hustle but don't have the energy, or want to kind of you know um do better in their career, learn a new skill, maybe socialize more, but they're just a bit tired, etc. around it. Our focus is around that kind of audience and that kind of niche, from a product and value perspective. There's another angle, which is owning your own data and getting rewards for that data.
Mm-hmm.
That there's also core proposition, and there's two messaging that we have, and we know that each of these messages resonate with the same person, but they can also resonate with different people. Some people only care about the rewards and the ownership angle. Others care more about, okay, what's the value that I get from a health perspective or like an outcome perspective. From a data ownership and rewards perspective, what we saw in the market was a lot of existing wearable companies. They were essentially sharing data with third parties, generating revenue by sharing that data with third parties, but not passing or flowing any of that revenue back to the users that they have, who are ultimately the creators of that data. So my view is, well, if I'm making the data, I should be getting paid for it, not you. So part of our game is to essentially democratize health data ownership and give the power back to the hands of the users and allow them to generate and receive value from sharing their data with third parties anonymously, securely, and consent based.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my research, I was reading about some of the places that will access this data too. Who do you guys expect to kind of come in and want access to Pulse data? Is it crypto companies? Is it traditional, insurance firms that want it? I mean, maybe all of the above, but like, what are you guys seeing right now?
Yeah, it's a plethora of companies. So pharmaceutical companies obviously want it for drug research, drug discovery. You even have like property companies wanting to access health data as well around, okay, which areas are more active or not active, etc. Maybe I'm building a gym. I want to have a better idea around where to build this gym from a location perspective. I'm going to use the G word, which is governments. I know everyone hates governments in crypto, but even governments want access to this data from a policymaking perspective as well. How we allow data sharing to happen is anonymously consent based. So if you don't want to share your data with third party because the rewards aren't good enough, or you just don't want to because you don't like that company or the purpose that they're using for it, you don't share your data.
Got
Right now, that choice, we don't have it as much. So that's what Pulse is kind of flipping, is putting that power back to the user.
Yeah. My expectation is over time, like with all of these various data sharing protocols, we're not there yet, but like you'll have a wallet. It's really around data and how it's monetized from various sources. So it could be like a demo car device, your Pulse wristband, other things that are in your home. There's just going to be a lot of, like, in aggregate, all of that data will amount to something. Individually, it might be a little bit more challenging, but like the aggregate view will be quite large. Maybe just turning to the fundraise, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to tease out here, because you guys have experimented with a lot of different styles of fundraising. You have some crowd fundraising, obviously traditional venture like Collab and Lattice. But turning to that now, like, let's just start with like the fundraising journey and how you connected with Derek and the Collab team.
Yeah. So, we started out back in May last year, formally as a business. We've been experimenting in health and crypto all the way since like January. I've been experimenting in health generally since like 2023. And it's kind of funny. We won a couple of hackathons back in May last year, like Solana hackathons. And when you're not raising, everyone wants to give you money. So we, um, we just were very lucky to like run into like really good people at a couple of events, etc. You're talking about, Tristan from Backpack, like Gumshoe as well, Jeff Renaud, Anatoly, etc. And one thing kind of just led to another where, such and shared a deal here. Santiago kind of came along, saw what we were up to. We had a call with him, etc. as well. And, I found myself like, it means like make a deck, set up a company and get all that done frantically, and then find a lawyer to help us with the paperwork, etc. as well. And, whilst we weren't prepared, I kind of at least knew the game, and I got all of it done pretty quickly to kind of make it happen. And then over the summer, we just got our heads down and started building. And what was really kind of telling for us over that summer was, we went from being like this very kind of loud team in the Solana UK ecosystem to like just no one knew what we were up to for about 4 or 5 months. And then once we kind of had a product vision, MVPs, etc., and we kind of knew where we wanted to go, that's when we started thinking, okay, well, we know we need to raise more capital to kind of pull all of this off. And again, like what helped us a lot was our existing angels. I just DM'd them all, said, hey, this is our plan. This is what we'd like to do. And, one of our angels introduced us, to Derek. And then, I'm pretty sure one of our angels introduced you to us, Mike, as well. And you kind of just know when things click more than anything else, just by the way people ask questions during a raise. I could tell like in the first 5 minutes if we were interested in that VC or if that VC was interested in us. Some funds actually, just say, look, guys, it's clear we're not gelling well. You don't quite understand the thesis. Maybe we just touch base on all the time, and they were a bit caught off of that, But my view is, man, I got a 30-minute call. I'd rather take 10, 20, 15 minutes back of my time and just get on with work than, spend out wasting my time on these type of calls. But, the round came together generally pretty quickly. I think, Derek, we spoke late August, and, 2 weeks later, boom, we kind of had a term sheet, and things just got pretty wild from there, where we had to move pretty quickly and get things kind of sorted. And then, yeah, that Echo round and Legion round, we were kind of one of the first. We were the first team to do the Legion round. That was a huge risk for us, to be quite frank. Legion was an untested platform, untested team. This kind of model of community-based fundraising was still a bit of a question mark, I would say. Around mid-November time. But I really liked Fab and the team, and for me, like getting community ownership is really important because that's how you get mindshare on Twitter. That's how you kind of get more hardcore fans. And, we're building a consumer product. So, fans for us are really important. And Legion was exciting because it allowed us to choose the investor as well.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
I definitely want to unpack Legion and Echo more. I bet Derek has a lot of thoughts on it, but I sometimes find like the investor side of the story is like different from the founder side and like how things came together. But yeah, like Derek, how did you guys find Pulse, or like maybe in the hackathon? How'd this come together on your end?
Yeah, so I think it was Jeff Renault, who's very plugged into the Solana ecosystem, that met with River and the team when they were running through one of the hackathons. I think you guys got first in the London hackathon. I can't remember exactly which one it was. And I'll just say broadly, taking a step back, I wear an Aura ring just for whatever it's worth. I've thought very deeply about health data in the past. And pairing that with like what I think crypto is really good at and blockchains are really good at, I think I know you guys are investors in Demo, Mike, and I know that there's a lot of folks that are circling around this concept of can we activate on one side of a market people to contribute interesting information and incentivize them through crypto rewards and use blockchains as a recording format for that. And on the opposite side of the market, can we take some of that information that's being incentivized through crypto and repackage it and resell it in the aggregate to some end user? I know in things like Demo and Hive Mapper, it's real world information, it's maps, it's stuff that's useful for folks that are creating mapping like outcomes or the data that goes to populate those types of outcomes. But the same concept can really apply to anything. I think the killer use case that got this whole thing started was Bitcoin. It was, can we incentivize a bunch of machines to be turned on to play this economic game in exchange for some rewards to create a network that supports commodity money? And I think we're running that playbook now in more granular ways and more consumer-like outcomes. And so for me, I think knowing that I know crypto and blockchains are so powerful at like creating these types of markets, the question has always been like, well, knowing that, I think the information that everyone on this call recognizes, it's like the health data market is going to be like 500 billion in the next decade. It's growing very quickly. I think it's something like 50 billion today. The wearables market's very similar. It's like a 60 or 70 billion market today. It's plans to 8 to 10x over the next 10 years. Is there a way to kind of use crypto economics and blockchains to bring health information to have those same types of outcomes and create these markets around it? And so, a lot of our thesis when we invest, it's very early. It's finding the right founder who's working on the right problem at the right time. It felt like the things were coming together to allow for a wearable-like outcome for health data to exist. River and his team of co-founders have been very thoughtful about creating software for health data. We did a couple calls with Vish, their chief product officer, who's out in China, who was putting these things together. I've done some manufacturing in China myself. And if you have someone who's really smart and hungry and wants to put these pieces together and find the right suppliers, and you spend enough time there, you can create those types of outcomes. And although it was early, although they were still kind of testing in prod, as it were, like we felt really strongly about this group. And so Greg, I credit Greg on my team who did a lot of work on this, and we did a series of calls with the team, and they worked through our diligence questions very patiently. And then the round came together, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, we appreciated the introduction because you are the path for us to find Pulse here at Lattice. Derek, this was like I said, AI. There's consumer. There's a bunch of different things that came together. But you also mentioned just like we want to find a founder at the right time doing this. Is there anything like when you think of all of the diligence processes you go through as a fund, and you in particular, like this is a question I need to answer for every founder, or like something you like a rubric you use for every founder to know that they are the right founder to build what they're trying to build?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say I would extend that question to be founders or like core team, because it's often the case that like the founder or the CEO doesn't have everything. And so you want to kind of like, you want to index against the entire package. And so for us, it was really important to see, how River interacted with his team, what, skills obviously that he had to kind of like bring this product together in a leadership role, whether they had the right product person in place, whether they have the right software person in place. I think you want to make sure that this team functions together and brings different parts of the package together in a really interesting way, that they have domain expertise in the category. All of them have kind of hacked on products that are very related to the Pulse wearable. I think ultimately we're betting on folks that we can work with as well. And so like so much of it is just like, do we vibe? Like do they take feedback? Are they going to listen to our suggestions? Because we've been doing, Mike, we've been doing this a while. And so like we've seen some things. And so it's nice to know that when you're working at the earliest stages with a founding team, that maybe you're able to kind of deliver some advice or some feedback in a way that they can incorporate into their product or their rollout or hiring or whatever it may be. And oftentimes like there's just like not that shared trust at the early stages that you can feel out during diligence, and it kind of disqualifies a potential investment. But I will say, when you're investing pre-seed and seed, like this deal, there's not a lot to underwrite on the product side yet. And so you're really just trying to make sure that the core ingredients are there. And it's less about a single question and more just like, can we get conviction that this is the right group working on the right problem, and this is the time for this problem to kind of like start meeting the market?
Yeah. The team composition here in this case covers, I think, a lot of different facets of how you can bring this type of product to market. Going back a little bit to the fundraising path, because this is a hot topic of conversation, especially for founders and investors. Like, what do we think the results of the reemergence of ICOs effectively? Like, we're not quite there yet, but like crowdfunding is coming back. And this is near and dear to us, both Regan and I at Lattice, because we were at CoinList. I think Collab is actually an investor in CoinList, but like, yeah, maybe for each of you, like, how do you think this is going to evolve the fundraising landscape for both investors and founders? Platforms like Legion, CoinList, Echo, what role do they play, and how do you see them changing things?
Yeah, it's gonna just keep evolving, and let's face it, we had launch pads the last cycle. It's just whether it's the MakerDAO launch pad or there was like the gaming launch pad, etc. There was like a launch pad in Arbitrum, etc. as well. We had a lot. This time I would say it's different, because typically on a launch pad you kind of expected the coin to TGE pretty shortly, that day or the day after, etc. And my opinion was always negative around launch pads from the last cycle, because the incentive always was raise the most amount of money, because for the launch pad itself, that's also how they made a lot of money. So they were, the founders were incentivized to raise as much capital as possible, which I understand why, but because the launchpad was as well, it meant that you were just getting some deals that were a bit more, a bit questionable on the block. I think the difference this cycle with kind of launchpads now, etc., with Echo and Legion is, at least with Echo, it's group based. So if you're not liking the deals that are coming to your group, you just go out and join another group. So it gives more flexibility and freedom to investors as a result. Whereas back in the day, there was kind of only like 2 or 3 launch pads you could really go to try and get a deal, and it was kind of take it or leave it. And sometimes deals were launch pads were chain specific, so you really could only go on certain launch pad if you were on Arbitrum or if you were on Avalanche, etc. Now with Echo and Legion, they're kind of like chain agnostic, which helps. I've seen Echo have a lot of deals on Hyperliquid and Solana, that wouldn't have kind of come out, that wouldn't have kind of been able to launch last cycle on a Solana only, launch on an Arbitrum launch pad, while you're launching projects from a different chain, basically, kind of thing. I think investors are also more educated this time around, but that education sometimes flies out the window when the market gets a bit hot. So what's really important as like a founder is, who are you selecting? Are you going in the right groups on Echo that are, the kind of educated, smart money kind of groups that understand the investment, it's a long-term kind of approach and mindset. Same with like Legion, when you can select your investors in Legion, so you can kind of make up your kind of cap table in that way. Are you picking investors that are interested in your category and your product, etc., not just because of the money? And you didn't really have that last cycle. So I would say this cycle it's a bit more merit-based investing, which I think is quite exciting, and it's a big unlock.
Yeah, so I really like all of that. I have, can I just like rant for just a
Yeah,
minute,
yeah,
like
yeah.
on a couple
Bring
of
it,
these
bring
topics?
it. Yeah,
Okay. So philosophically, I really do believe that this is a social technology, right? Like these networks don't work unless you have wide groups of participants that are like supporting the build out. Now, those networks can be useful for, contributing core code. They can be useful for messaging and marketing. They can be useful for acting as, suppliers on one side of a market, or, a demand side on the other side of the market. But the function, like these are social protocols, these are social products, and you want wide ranging, robust user bases that are supporting these types of networks steady state. And so things like Legion and CoinList, I love them because they help accelerate that vision of finding kind of a wide group of contributors to have ownership over the upside of these networks at the early stages. So philosophically love them, believe in those types of products. Now, I will also say I went to law school. I'm technically an attorney. I don't practice, but I passed the bar. We had a market structure in the 1920s. The Roaring Twenties, right? And at the very end of that, there was rampant speculation. Number went up. The SEC was created in the 30s to basically do two things. It was to prevent fraud in our private markets, and it was to protect investors. We have a number of case law and rules and regulations that have been developed and originated out of kind of the formation of the SEC during the Great Depression. And I do believe that the earlier and earlier that you get in kind of like providing and provisioning ownership over these networks, without proper disclosures or without proper with unfortunately because of information asymmetry, it can lead to kind of unintended outcomes on those two prongs, which is maybe investors aren't getting the full information and they're not being protected adequately, or they're just straight up the recipient of like fraud. And like we see this with like with also, I'm not even going to name names. Like you guys have been around in the space long enough to understand like this is a thing that happens. And so I think for me, the tension here is we want wide groups of people to participate in these networks. We also want to make sure that investors and participants and user owners of these networks have the right information to make informed choices. And we want to kind of keep out the fraud from like the distribution of these networks. How do we achieve both of those goals in a way that moves the space forward? I think this is why I like things like Legion and CoinList and other products like this, is because they do map to kind of like regulatory infrastructure to support those dual interests. So I think there's better ways to achieve those goals. I think we're going to continue to optimize on this equation, but I think that's been like the big tension here is supporting both of these visions at the same time that leads to optimal outcomes across the board.
I think one of the beautiful things about the ICO era, if you will, is like there's so many people that got into this space because they were able to access one of these early ICOs. And you even look at something like Chainlink, it had its trough in the bear market, but a lot of people that came into crypto during that time were like, hey, I accessed the Chainlink ICO and I made a lot of money, and now I'm hooked. That's sort of got taken away for a while, where not many people could access these early deals. So I think like bringing it back and giving broader exposure to people all around the world is definitely going to
Yeah.
attract more interest from various constituents.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, you were running CoinList for a couple of years, and uh, have you seen a difference in investor sentiment or trends, or even how startups are kind of wanting to use CoinList or generally ICO platforms nowadays?
So I mean, in the past few months, the interest in you, I mean, really, I guess since Trump came into office, like I feel like all bets are off to a certain extent. Everyone's like, oh, now I'll do a token sale. So it's shifted dramatically from teams just being like, hey, can I launch a token, to now being like, oh, like I'm definitely going to do an Echo sale or a CoinList sale at some point. So it's definitely changed, but it's evolved because like when I was at CoinList was kind of the only game in town at that point of time for your higher profile projects. Like you talked about the launch pads. I feel like a lot of those were largely kind of scammy, like you said. Whereas, CoinList had kind of mostly like what was considered your tier one projects, but they were also more expensive. And they had lockups associated with them. They were a bit more regulated and you couldn't always get access. But, I think, broadly speaking, like what we're going to see is more ways for investors to get access to deals at various stages of the fundraising journey, just like you guys. Like it's not it's not an ICO. Like you guys did an Echo round. Like it's almost like a seed round, but just getting a broader base of investors into it. And we were even allowed to call them investors at that point of time. So purchasers,
buyers,
owners of the networks. Yeah, I'll also say, just that, Mike, this is I think a great question that you're asking here. I'll also say like a trend that I think you would feel strongly about, and I also do, is this idea of there being you touched on this idea of like access at various stages. I feel very strongly that user owners or non-sophisticated or non-institutional investors should be part of like these rounds that we're structuring on behalf of institutions. And I think that that lends credibility to these markets that form around them. I think it provides meaningful access and opportunity to those that want to contribute earlier on in a life cycle. I think it does a better job of creating authenticity around like a product or service that you're bringing to market. And so I only suspect that trend. I don't think venture is going away anytime soon. I think we play a very specific role in the market, underwriting and researching and doing these deals at the earliest stages to find great founders like River in a sea of folks that are, maybe not as great. And I think there's signal there. But I will also say I feel very strongly that regular folks who want to participate in these networks should not be precluded from doing so at the early stages if they are properly, like if they have the proper amount of information and the proper disclosures, and there's a way for them to kind of like, be at equal parity in terms of like, diligence. And I think that tuning that component is something that I'm very interested in and want to see more of. And I think folks like Echo and Legion and CoinList are on the bleeding edge of that trend.
Yeah, I think the space to watch out for is the sort of mid to late stage fundraising market, because you look at some rounds that, maybe it was $100 million round, and that could be done from a crowd for a hot project. At CoinList, like there were rounds that were north of 100 million. I mean, the Filecoin sale was 250 million, and getting 50,000 investors for one of those is probably going to be more advantageous than maybe a single investor. So I think that's definitely going to evolve. But it's also, the other facet here is, in the good times, the crowd wants to contribute. During the bad times, it's really only like a dedicated set of capital that can come into these projects. So hopefully the good times keep going, but hasn't always been the case in crypto. Maybe just going back to Pulse, obviously you guys have done a number of fundraising rounds, but you're also selling actual devices. So maybe River, if you kind of walk us through some of the metrics, what you guys have achieved and what like some of the future plans are over the next few months as you bring more of the wearables to market.
Yeah, so we started selling the devices early November. And I'm of the ilk that if you can't sell, then what the hell are you doing building? So as soon as we got that raise done, that gave us the ability to just get the right team members in place, get the right website up and running, etc., and the sales materials to start generating revenue. In 3 months, we've done 4,000 sales of the devices. That's about 1 million in revenue altogether that we've made. So, quite excited from that. And it was very much one of these things where you start small, where we kind of introduce this wave structure. first batch was about 150, then we kind of upped it to 250, and then 400, 500, and then the last wave was about 1,500 altogether that we that we sold. This wave, I think we're doing about 3,000 here. Yeah, that helped us because it allowed us to kind of get users in early, reward them from, each wave you get a certain percentage of rewards. So earlier you are, the more rewards you kind of earn. And that helped us just get that early set of users that are hyper excited about the product and will refer others to kind of buying the product as well. So we kind of did a bit of analysis, and what we kind of found out was users about waves 1, 2, 3 were referring their friends, etc., at higher percentages than users that bought wave 4, 5, and 6. Referrals were still happening, generally from every wave, but that was an interesting kind of metric to kind of find out. Yeah, like selling has been a lot of fun, and it's exciting to see so much demand for the product. And what it allows us to do is basically have a captive audience that we can kind of actually test things with. So when we were designing the device, we actually had a small group of early buyers that we knew, kind of had a similar design background to what we wanted from a feedback perspective. So we kind of shared the mock-ups of them, got feedback, etc., before we kind of went out to market with like the new version of the product that we kind of showed. So yeah, it's I encourage every founder, if you've got a product, whether it's an app or a DEX, or whether it's a physical device, just get it launched, start getting customers, and start building that community and that ecosystem.
Yeah, and then maybe just to touch on, you're selling the wearables, but there's also other sides of the data. One of the interesting collaborations you have is in the decentralized science space, which has been pretty hot, over the past year. What does that look like for you guys? Like, how are you guys collaborating in the DeSci space specifically?
Yeah, so we launched the project. We launched a collaboration with Pump Science. They're one of the biggest DeSci protocols, in all of crypto. And and I want to paraphrase this as well. Well, I want to kind of backtrack a bit. We get so many collaboration requests. Like I've got like hundreds of DMs from every week from like NFT projects, launch pads, yada yada, you name it. Like they're kind of do it, and we kind of just say no to almost everyone under the sun. But Pump Science, when they reached out, it made sense for us because there's an actual integration with the device. It's not a collab for the sake of just showing off on Twitter and creating some noise. What they're actually doing is, integrating the device into their trading terminal. So users that take part in the next Pump Science study, they can integrate their wearable device, their pulse wearable device, and their health data will be aggregated onto the Pump Science dashboard. So you can see a user's sleep, VO2 max, recovery heart rate, etc., as part of that study. And then you can make a decision around, oh, is this a Pump Science drug that they've released and that they're doing a study around? Is it working or not using that health data? So it's kind of a world's first in that regard. There's no one. We've had decentralized studies before, but we've never had decentralized studies powered by a wearable device, where that data is publicly available for an audience to kind of make a speculative kind of decision on. So when we kind of spoke to Benji and the team, it made sense for us just because of that integration perspective. And it's the first kind of study. We'll go live with them April, May time. I think we'll probably give you some alpha here, but it's gonna be quite exciting to kind of see all that get live and go to market.
Yeah, definitely. We've got Pump.Fun and Pump.Science now, so all good pumps. Keep the pump going. Anyhow, maybe just to kind of wrap things up, we talked about hardware, token sales, and crowd fundraising. So it's been super interesting chat, but anything else that people should know about, like they can purchase the device and maybe like following you guys, what's the best way to follow along?
Yeah, so our Twitter is the best place. Most of all of our updates end up there. You can follow us on /pulse no limits. Discord's a great place as well. Join the community, ask questions. Our community is very active. They share workouts that they do. People have questions around, hey, should I go on a diet? Should I do some more running, etc.? How do I sleep better? We feel like, if you're just a longevity or productivity kind of maxi, get in our Discord and feel free to hang out with like the other guys there. We have a couple of updates we'll be releasing pretty soon, like next week and the week after. So just, yeah, have that notification bell on Twitter. You got to be fast to take advantage of some of those.
Well, hopefully we can get this episode out by then, but no promises yet. Derek, and then for you, you've got a prolific Twitter account, a lot of different interesting conversations,
interesting takes.
Yeah, what's the best way for people to keep in touch with you?
I appreciate that. Yeah, you can follow me at DerekEdws on Twitter. You can follow Collab at collabcurrency.com or collab_currency on Twitter. Follow me, follow my business partner, Steve. We also have some really awesome investors on our team that you should follow. Mike, obviously, and Regan, you guys are awesome at Lattice. We love doing projects with you guys. So follow those guys too, of course.
Thank you.
And I guess the last thing I'll say, and we didn't get to unpack it too much in here, but I think with stuff like Pulse, it's really important for people to kind of there's so much hard work that Rivers is doing right now and his team is doing right now that sometimes it can be easy to focus on like what's going on today, but not lose sight of like this grand vision, this bigger vision of what's happening. And I would say with stuff like Pulse, the stuff I'm most excited for is, 2, 3, 4 years from now, I imagine a world where there's tens of millions of these devices out there taking real-time data and curating it and aggregating it in ways that are very useful. And if we know anything about AI, what we do know is that they're very good at running computation against really interesting novel forms of data and creating, patterns and being able to pull out insights that can be very value accretive for all sorts of different outcomes. And I would say there's nothing quite like Pulse out there right now that's really rewarding users in this way. And the thing I'm most excited for is all of the great stuff right now. I'm so pumped that they've sold 4,000, 5,000 units. I think where River wants to take this is tens of millions of units, pulling in real-time health data that's, feeding into these large payloads that are inevitably going to exist around data and compute and these systems that are very good at aggregating and surfacing insights for the world's benefit. So yeah, that's where we're going, and that's why I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because during our diligence process, just about everyone that we talked to about data put healthcare data at the top of the list, and health, wellness, fitness data in terms of what's most valuable to AI related companies. So you guys fit squarely in that, and we're excited for what comes next. Anyhow, thank you both for coming on. Great to chat with you, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.